I also have done lots of HCI projects, lots of digital humanities stuff, including digital archiving tools, things like that. And I briefly worked on an artificial intelligence project at NASA, which was on planning and scheduling in robotic spacecraft. So I've got quite a kind of overview of computer science topics. Came back to horses fairly recently. Natural Horsemanship, a program called Parelli, P-A-R-E-L-L-I, which some people may know about, which is a people training program rather than a horse training program, and it's focused on the study of horse behaviour and teaching humans horsemanship skills, how to be with horses. It's all about teaching them how to train their own horse rather than training their horse for them, which is quite different from other more traditional methods. I found, as I was in parallel doing my own research in computer science and also learning how to be a horsemanship instructor, I found that some of the explanations that I was being given for why training worked, I wasn't quite convinced by. Still to be tested, some of them. For example, does the horse regard the human as being a herd member? Do horses need leadership? I was being told that horses needed a human to act as a leader and that they would be recognised as another horse in the herd. Now that's not something we necessarily find to be true across other areas of animal science, and views have changed on that to some extent. So I wondered why I was being told one thing. Having said that, the methods I was using were working. I was seeing horses that were happy, that were relaxed, that responded to me in ways that I was pleased with, but I wanted to know exactly what was going on. So that led me to ethology, the science and objective study of animal behaviour. So I started doing self-study into that. I found out about equine learning theory, about how horses learn. And also that finally led me to equitation science, which is how I got in touch with Carol Hall, who's with you today. So I started to think, right, I want to do something that looks into all these aspects of horsemanship that I know work, and I want to find out why they work, and I want to be able to apply the same kind of critical thinking to horsemanship that I'm applying to my computer science skills, my HCI. So that brings us to Habit. Habit is Horse Automated Behaviour Identification Tool. At the moment, it's a short-term project. We have funding for the short term from the Mixed Reality Laboratory at the University of Nottingham, where I'm based, to develop an interdisciplinary network of people, the researchers on this project, to see how we can take Habit further and to link up all these different areas. So we've got ACI people, we've got HCI people, including me, got horse training and behaviour people, so that's Bian, Carol, equitation science, ethology, and through Mandy we've got anatomy and biomedical engineering. So we've got a team, quite an interesting team of people looking at the animal science and the computer science side. So the intention with Habit is that it would automate the analysis and the recognition of both horse-to-horse and horse-to-human behaviours. So it's species specific in the sense that we're looking at how horses play with each other and how they act in the wild and how they act in the domestic situation. But we're also interested in the interspecies interaction, and that's why it also ties in nicely with ACI and issues there about human animals, non-human animals, etc. We wanted to be able to do something with Habit where the video is unconstrained. So we didn't want to just go for a technology that would only work in the lab, or it would work in the field, but only in a very constrained way, say from above, filmed down from cameras above. We wanted to be able to get videos from YouTube or crowdsourced videos, submissions from people who are friendly to the project, and be able to use those straight away, whatever the background quality, whatever the viewpoint for the filming, whatever the lighting. And that's obviously, there's lots of technical challenges associated with that. So currently what happens in animal science, and Carol could say far more about this than I can, the observation techniques that are used when people are observing animals and animal behaviour are manual, they're videoed, and then somebody physically has to sit, usually with a piece of software to assist them, logging the behaviours that are seen. So they're literally saying, yep, 5 minutes of that, 6 minutes of that, don't know what that behaviour is, you know. And there's a predetermined behavioural profile of expected behaviours, and so it's easy to go through and just say that horse is doing this, and then that's how it's done at the moment. So part of what we were doing is simply to automate that process, so that actually all of that would be easier for animal scientists who are studying horses, either completely in the wild, literally not in the HCI context, or domesticated horses. So Habit will have welfare applications. we'll be able to say things like, is the horse operating within its normal repertoire of behaviours when it's living in humansville, so when it's living with humans in domesticity. So that would be when housed, when stabled, it usually is for horses, which Carol has written about and studied, stress and things in that area. When horses are handled, when they're on a lead rein and they're taken about. Are their behaviours normal? Is this something that horses would experience when they were with other horses? When they're ridden by people, which is, most people who are not familiar with horses think that's all that goes on, but there's an awful lot more to it. When they're transported, and that includes transportation for leisure activities and competitions, but it also, and I think sadly, includes for the food chain when they're moved about. Now, that's not something we particularly want to study, but obviously it could be a welfare tool that will say these horses are in extreme stress, they should not be in this transportation being carried across Europe or whatever. So there could be a role for automatic behaviour identification in that sense. Also, when mistreatment is suspected, if in cases of welfare where perhaps an owner is thought to be not giving a horse all that it needs, and this tool will be able to objectively say, we can say that these behaviours are not the behaviours of a natural horse or even a horse that's a domesticated horse, rather than simply having it being a matter of opinions. Also in competitive situations where horses are used for racing, dressage, eventing, show jumping and all of those kind of things. Again, people have different views on whether that's appropriate anyway, but this gives us tools to be able to look at them and say, are they relaxed about this and confident, or is this a stressful, painful experience for them? So as we start to develop the system, the first thing we want to do is a proof of concept that we can actually recognise one particular behaviour, and our system is able to do that. Before we start creating libraries of behaviour signatures and going down the whole route, we want to be sure that one is okay. So we're looking at one particular behaviour, which is called the following response. And this is something a bit like what you see with imprinting, where baby ducklings follow the mother around and things like that. That happens in horses as well. The foal follows the mother around after birth and links up to the mother. Also, horses follow each other when they're moving to resources. They will suddenly decide to all move off, and there's lots of literature about how that's happening, whether there's distributed leadership within the herd, whether there's some sort of quorum decision being made, or whether there really are leaders, alphas in the horse world. Now this is interesting to natural horsemanship people and the kind of work that I do with horses, because we are often taught that horses will follow us around. They will follow us around with no tack on. So I can train a horse in a specific way, play with it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, take its halter off, either in a field or probably more normally in a round pen or a smaller arena. And when I walk, this horse will suddenly coordinate with me and follow me. I stop, it stops. I back up and it backs up. It maintains the same distance from me. Now that's not something that is happening commonly to people who handle horses in the traditional world. They may see it, they may not. But we've obviously, in our natural horsemanship techniques, we've triggered specific ways to make a horse follow us. And I'm told by the people who train me that that's because the horse thinks I'm a horse and it's treating me as though I'm its mother and it's following me. But I don't know that for sure. It could be that I've simply trained the horse using classical conditioning, using something from learning theory to actually just make the horse think staying with me is a really good idea, because the alternatives will involve discomfort. And that might not be, that's not punishment, it might be some sort of negative reinforcement whereby I send the horse away and I say, go round and round me in a circle. And horses don't like using energy unless they really need to. So if the horse has a choice between running in a circle or standing next to me, it might well choose to stand next to me for that reason, not because it's linked up to me with some sort of magical connection. However, I have lots of experience of horses doing that and following me and obviously enjoying it, so I'm pretty convinced that there's something more to it. But this tool, and looking at the following response in particular, allows us to look into that particular area. And then obviously, moving on from that, we then start to look at other behaviours as well. So we have a kind of project timeline for this. We're getting our network together, talking about technologies, starting to get to crowdsource some video clips from people who are interested in the project, but right now we don't have the funding to go to stage 2, but hopefully we're working on it. We don't have it at the moment. the next stage would be to develop or to refine existing computer algorithms that are used for the automatic identification, tracking, and the behavioural recognition of horses in video recordings. So a lot of that technology exists not just for tracking horses or animals. Some of it's about human surveillance. Some of it's about work on automated vehicles and being able to detect animals that run out in front of them. So there's lots of different fields that are working on that same problem, and in computer vision it's a big issue. So we need to be sure what the cutting edge of that is and that we're not reinventing the wheel. We also need to be sure that everything we want is achievable realistically. Obviously we're talking about, this isn't real time. At the moment we're talking about analysing video retrospectively. So real time brings into it all kinds of new issues about computer power and feasibility. It would be great to be able to say we can stick a camera up in a field and the computer's going to say that's a such and such behaviour, that's the other behaviour, and maybe one day we'll be there. At the moment we're talking about pre-recorded video. So we will, after we've done our technology review, then we will start to look at establishing video data sets of example horse-to-horse behaviours for the following response. We will then start to look at the behavioural signatures themselves. For example, we might look at gait, proximity to other horses, speed of movement, direction, the order that a herd moves in, their posture, including ear position, muscle tension, all those kind of things would give us clues to a particular type of behaviour so that we can say that's the signature for the following response. Then we're going to establish video data sets of horses following humans, as I was just describing in this kind of natural horsemanship context, and then we will start trialling it on video clips once we've got a system to play with. And then ultimately we'll evaluate the algorithms and the software tool, and we'd be looking for statistically significant rates of behaviour detection. So we want it to be able to say that behaviour is present or it's not present. So the habit system, it's both an ACI system, it's a kind of universal translator for translating horse language into humans for welfare use, as I described. It's also a support tool to aid the ACI design process, in that it can capture a horse's requirements to deal with a challenge. For example, a challenge might be the lack of social interaction, boredom, lack of play, fear, etc. All these could be challenges within the horse's environment, particularly when they live with humans. And then we would monitor the equine's response to this new system. So we put some sort of ACI system in, and then we'd say, and has that improved things? And Habit will be able to tell us. So in that role, it's a support tool for ACI. In the other role, it's actually an ACI system itself. So quick look at the time. Gosh, it's running away from me here. Okay, very quickly looking at automated behaviour identification. This is the technology side. There are three aspects to it: recognition, tracking, and identifying behaviours. What usually happens in the kind of computer vision field, and some of you will know this, some of you won't, is that you train a system using a data set of the animal or whatever it is you want to track in different poses. That's a common way to do it. You teach the system what a horse looks like, and then it's able to say, I think that's a horse when it sees a horse moving. You then look at the difference between individual video frames, or you possibly even subtract a background away and say what's left and is it moving and is it a horse. Now to do that you need an image of the background, which is slightly restricts you in that you need to start with a good background image. You can also, there are also aspects you can add, like coding for specific characteristics of a species. So human animals, for example, have a periodic quality in their walk that means that they stand out on video. So horses may have something similar. So in addition to saying, does it look like a horse shape and silhouette, we can also say, oh, is it moving in a particular rhythm? Is it moving at a particular speed? Does it stop and start? And that will give us clues as well. So we want Habit to be able to work in the field, not just the laboratory. There's lots of stuff that does animal behaviour, automated behaviour identification in plan from above with a camera, looking at animals that only move around in 2D. We want it to work in the field with all kinds of things of 3D and perspective going on as well, so it's quite challenging. We want it to work in complex habitat where the backgrounds can change and the lighting can change. We want to be able to track lots of individual animals and maintain that tracking on them. And we want to be able to some extent, track the poses, the anatomical poses as well. Again, in the same way you can code for characteristics of individuals, you can and animals, you can code for characteristics of herds as well. So you can say, how does a herd normally move? Is this a herd? So, I've also been thinking, takes me slightly beyond, for the future, beyond habit, whether ACI needs to consider its use of methodologies, and are HCI methodologies appropriate for ACI. And I have some experience with that on an HCI project that was with human animals where they weren't allowed to speak. And in that, we used ethnography, which is the kind of default go-to for HCI initially. And we used all the descriptive and qualitative aspects of that to describe the behaviours that were being seen, the practices observed, and all of those aspects. But I started to find that I wanted to do a bit more. I wanted to categorise behaviours and to say these non-verbal behaviours in humans, actually kind of where are they from. So I started to bring in aspects of ethology. So I'm bringing the animal science stuff in. So I would argue that actually there is a role for looking at a methodology for ACI that actually includes some of the animal science ethology stuff, behavioural profiles, because it allows us to generalise results between studies. So rather than with ethnography, we can't really do that. We can actually be more specific. It also gives animals a voice in multi-species and interspecies studies, because whereas with ethnographic study you're quite reliant on language, description, the researcher actually knowing the species. Does the researcher know anything about horses, or do they only know about humans? And being able to say definitively these are specific behaviours and they've changed in this way gives extra power to what we normally do in HCI and ethnography. So that would be a role for Habit as well. Habit would be a tool to work on that as a support tool to help us develop methodologies in the future and move forward. I'm looking at the time. Yes, that's about right, I think. So I think I'll leave it there, except for I will just show you, look, I've gone back to horses now. This is me recently, lying on the ground with my young horse who's just over a year old, who trusts me and lets me lie down with them. So I'm back with the horses again. Thanks. Anybody want to know anything? Questions? Or I think I briefly touched on that, in that we would like to do pose, and how far we can go down, and posture, and how far we can go down that road depends on how much the technology allows us when we get to that stage. We need to be able to track individuals, and we need to be able to follow them even if they're occluded by another horse or a person. So there's a lot of challenges there. There are certain key bits in horse language, body language, like ear position and tail position, and their musculature, whether they're contracted or whether they're elongated in their bodies. And it might be we have to use simple analysis like that. I would love to do something more skeletal, and I'm sure that Mandy Rochier would be able to help us with that because of her anatomy input. But we, at this stage, until we've done the technology review, we can't really be sure whether we can include that at this stage. They're incredibly hard to, what was the word? To draw. Yeah, yes, but I mean, hopefully we can still teach a computer what they look like by showing them images from other sources. I think that's the point. I mean, if horses can track humans, they can track elephants, they can track horses just as well. One of the I didn't mention actually, one of the particular challenges with horses over other animals is a project that's done something very close to what we want to do, has done it with elephants. But elephants are all grey, so they're very easy. You can say, if it's a big grey object and it's moving across the screen, it's probably an elephant. Whereas horses are different colours and different coat patterns. You know, some of them are black and white with splodges on. So unless we can find some clever way to identify individuals by the coat marking, and that has been done with cows, I know somebody who's done that with cows, then it doesn't really help us that they're all so different. So we're going to have to rely, I believe, quite a lot on outline, and then also characteristics of movement. Thanks. We haven't got as far as how long it will take us. We have ideas from previous research, like that elephant research I was just talking about, where I think it took them several thousand still images to teach the system what an elephant looked like. They called those the ground truth images, which was the images that represented the animal as you would like to see it. I don't see that as being a huge problem. I mean, as long as it's a one-off process and we're able to have a training situation and then move forward, and identification is proven to be reliable enough. I mean, it's all about whether you're getting lots of false positives and it's all, you know, it's not really reliable. We're going to have to find out how reliable we can make it. Now, we have colleagues who are happy to act as domain experts who are working on specifically this. They're working on facial tracking and facial recognition and animal tracking, and they're real kind of algorithm programming people. So I mean, I'm a kind of generalist in computer science. I'm very HCI and I program a lot, and I've done lots of visual stuff, but I'm not a computer vision specialist. So we've had to bring in two colleagues who are, so they're advising us on what we can do. But we haven't, at this point, well, I don't want to narrow things down by saying we're definitely going in this direction until we've actually got the real time to look at that properly. No, I think that's a valid question, because obviously the more, if we want to find out how animals behave in the wild, we can't be sticking cameras up somewhere that's going to change their behaviour. So if they're aware of being observed in that way, obviously we're not seeing their true behavioural repertoire anyway, and they would make it known by leaving. So their response would be, we don't stand near that tree because it's got a camera in it, you know, or that observer keeps popping up from behind a bush. We'll go over the other side of the range and stay away from them. So I think that's one of the reasons at the moment it's all about doing it retrospectively, capturing the video in a way where they're unaware of the camera, so we're seeing the true behaviours as much as possible. I mean, it gets difficult when we're working with crowdsourced material, because people are already sending us videos where they are with their domestic horses and they're filming them on their phone or whatever, and so there the horse is aware of their presence. So, you know, there are issues there. I agree that we will have to look at how that affects what the horse is doing when they're aware that the human is there with a camera pointing at them. But initially, to capture the kind of the basic behaviours and the basic behaviour repertoire, I think we'd be talking about doing it in a way they're unaware of the observation. Thanks.